Sports books, office pools, fantasy. No matter how you monetize NFL football, SugarBookie has you covered and all bets are on. What's happening, friends? Anthony Carabasi here for SugarBookie.com. Your host, as always. Joining me now is senior fantasy analyst Cody Tewmey. We're going to do a live mock draft here. You can get sort of the inside scoop of what we're thinking, how we go about this. Now, we did this completely randomly. We're using Yahoo, and we are drafting 5th overall. So without any further ado, let's bring Cody on. Cody, how are you today, buddy?
Doing well, Anthony. How about yourself?
Just living the dream, bud. Fantasy football's back, and it should be a very exciting year, that's for sure.
I'm excited. We got a good hole shot there. So before our pick comes up, I'll just say a few things. If you hear any of our other podcasts, you'll know kind of my plan is to have no plan, and that is key when you are drafting. Another thing is to know the scoring. So we're looking at the scoring here. Standard Yahoo league. So this is no PPR. Looks like a standard defensive league. No funny business there. Mock drafts are really good for the first, 5 to 8 rounds. Usually people stay in and they're serious about them. After that, I'll just kind of go into some guys I like to target. 5 is a randomly thing that we got, but it's a good gauge of where people might end up kind of in the middle, and it'll give us time in between picks to kind of show how guys are falling. If we were on the bookend one way or the other, I don't like to be on the bookend unless it's because I won the league when you have no other choice, because you don't get to exploit as much value, because usually 2 people aren't going to fall to you in value. So since you pick right back to back, sometimes you end up getting the best value, and then in your next pick, you're taking the best ceiling you see in the next 5 or 6 picks. So no surprise here. Antonio Brown goes number 1.
No surprise at all. And Odell Beckham goes number 2. We're up, and we've got the 3 top wide receivers went first. David Johnson went off the board. Now, you had said Adrian Peterson because you're a fan of getting a solid double base hit, et cetera, in the first round. Are we pulling the trigger on Adrian Peterson here at 5 overall?
Yeah, I would go with Peterson or A.J. Green here.
I'm going to go ahead and say let's take a running back. So let's go with Adrian Peterson. All right,
yeah, and the thing is, you have to remember that the majority of the people in your league aren't going to go on there and make their own rankings, right? So it's important to know the rankings, because inevitably people are going to be following those base rankings. And when you move guys around, the guy may be at the top of your queue because you really like him, but in the standard queue, he may be 30 picks away still.
Now, I don't really think there's any surprises up to this point in this draft until now at the 8th pick. One of the players here decided to go with, so there goes A.J. Green, as you had said, but Dez Bryant goes 8th overall. That's kind of a curious pick here. As far as Yahoo is concerned, Dez Bryant is ranked number 9. So above A.J. Green and above Adrian Peterson, who were the 2 guys we were looking at. And we could have had Gurley, we could have had Elliott. We went with Adrian Peterson. Probably, I think you can make the argument Peterson is probably the surest thing, and I'm including the top 3 wide receivers that we had talked about in the podcast. But very interesting that Bryant goes that high, and there goes Lamar Miller, 10th, who you're pretty high on this year. And, okay, there it is, 11th, Cam Newton goes that early. So you do have those guys. So high.
Yeah. He's not going to perform. He's not going to produce. The 11th pick, you could have had DeAndre Hopkins, Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski is in his own league in tight ends. No one else is going to score close to what he scores on a consistent basis. And now you're taking a quarterback that I will guarantee you by the end of this season, there will be 3 quarterbacks that score within 10 points of Cam Newton, and none of them are going to get drafted in the next 20 picks by anyone with a brain.
Do you mean 10 points on the season or 10 points per game? On the season. Okay. Well, there goes.
You have to think like he scored 200 and some points. I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers can score as much as him. I think Carson Palmer can score a lot this year. I think there's plenty of guys that, who's going to be the crappiest offense and, possibly air it out and score a lot of points. It's just stupid. When there's so much depth at QB, unless the league makes you play 2 QBs at the same time, there's no way to take a quarterback at 11th overall. It's just foolish.
Very interesting. And here we go again. We had talked about this before. about how many wideouts we're going early. We've now had, since we went, Adrian Peterson, Gurley Elliott, but then Des Bryant, A.J. Green, Lamar Miller, Cam Newton, so obviously non-wide receivers. But then we had kind of a run on them here. I know, I saw that. We'll get to that in a second. DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, Brandon Cooks go. Jamal Charles, it looked like had a chance to fall to us. He didn't. Rob Gronkowski looked like he had a chance to fall to us. He didn't. I'm kind of looking at Mike Evans here as probably the best guy. And as I had mentioned in the podcast, I think that Tampa Bay is a team that's really going to pop this year.
I think you're right. Their offense has a chance to pop. And like I said, Mike Evans had 4 touchdowns last year. There's no way he only scores that little of touchdowns. Like, he scored 167 points last year with 4 touchdowns. If he scores 8 touchdowns this year, that's another 32. That takes him up to 190.
No, we're not tempted. We're not tempted by Doug Martin here.
No.
Go Mike Evans. Okay, Mike Evans. You only get 30 seconds, so we'll throw that in there. And I think you make a good point.
Plus, we went running back with our first pick, so I don't want to pick 2 running backs if I like a guy there.
Yeah, and especially with this league too, where we've got quarterback, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, 1 defense.
You have to play 3, so.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to play 3 guys. So I think it's important to get a stud there, and we're both in big agreement that Evans could have an absolute monster year. It is a shame though. But let me ask you this: if Jamal Charles had fallen to us, would you have made that pick?
Yeah, really like Charles this year.
Yeah,
really like his upside.
Yeah.
He's a guy that probably goes top 5 if he doesn't have the injury history that he does.
Yep.
Obviously, he does have that, but his ceiling is so high.
Yeah, and then the other nice thing, exactly. I mean, I think that Doug Martin is a good player, but I don't think he's elite. Whereas Jamal Charles is elite. You make that pick, you've got Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles as your 2 starting running backs, and then all of a sudden you don't need to worry about running back. For another 8 or 9 rounds where you're just kind of filling in role players.
Yeah, at that point you're just going to take guys late that Tevin Coleman, guys that may get to start after injury, but you're not starting any of those guys the first 4 weeks. I don't care what your matchups are. You're rolling with those 2 guys unless they go down. So you're just at that point you're drafting late guys hoping they take over a starting role. Yeah,
indeed. I don't really think there's too much surprise here as far as what went down after our Evans pick, Mark Ingram.
I really like A.J. Green this year, though, too. We talked about him with our first pick. You have to think his market share in Cincinnati is going to go up with the departures of Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones. And I think Cincinnati is going to try to run the ball more, but A.J. is still going to be a really good touchdown target for them. No Eifert early in the year. I think Cincy's schedule actually sets up really nice for the playoffs.
Hold on for 1 second. So we'll get back to AJ in a minute, but we're 1 pick away. I'm kind of liking LaShawn McCoy. I like Sammy Watkins. Okay, so let's see. So Watkins goes. We can get LaShawn. And remember, the Buffalo Bills are the only team in the NFL last year that ran the ball more than 50% of the time. So when you talk about a workhorse, a load, LaShawn's there. There are some other weapons here. You see anything
injuries worry me. I like Cooper. I like even Eric Decker is pretty under.
Okay, got to make the call. What are we doing? LaShawn McCoy or Amari Cooper?
So it doesn't matter who we end up with because we kind of know what our talking points are. The thing with McCoy that worries me, he's already missed some practice time with the hamstring injury. Yes, they run the ball a lot, and Rex is going to want to run it. But with Tyrod being back as quarterback, he's got that scramble ability, and I think that takes away from some of the carries LaShawn might get because there might be some scripted runs for Tyrod Taylor. I just his injuries and his past production, he's an incredible talent, but it doesn't seem like he ever makes it to the playoffs when it comes to fantasy. So, and that's where you make your money. So that's why a guy like Cooper – his target percentage will be high this year. Plus, he has some of the best win percentages against man and press coverages of anybody. And he played all last year with an injury. So he had an injury all last season that they came out and mentioned this year that he had and he was dealing with all last season. So, and he still put up good numbers. So I think a healthy Amari Cooper at your 3rd pick, I think that I really like that pick there too. So
okay. Well, the good news is I don't think between those 2 guys we really could have made a bad pick. I actually would go with LaShawn McCoy, and here's why. based on what's gone down in the picks that have gone before us, wow, now you're starting to see some tight ends come off the board. Jordan Reed just went, interestingly enough. But one of the things is when you have a draft like this year that is so top heavy at the wide receiver position, that's going to mean there's some really quality running backs that fall. It's time to take a look at what we want to do here. I'm seeing Doug Baldwin.
Randall Cobb.
Randall Cobb. Okay.
I just really like the Green Bay offense this year. Doug Baldwin, I think it's going to be the same player, but if you listen to anything coming out of Seattle, they talk about how their offense is going to go back to, the ground and pound. That's what they're hoping to do. They drafted 3 running backs. I think Doug Baldwin's going to have a good year, but if you look at his numbers last year, I mean, a lot of that came in a 5-game stretch where he just was scoring 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Sure.
He scored, 7 touchdowns in 4 weeks or something crazy. No,
absolutely. No, absolutely. But just quickly on a side note, I might have been tempted to go with Greg Olsen. That's something we got into on the podcast. I could have been tempted with Olsen here in theory. And I just want to point out, too, that when you're looking at the availability of talent right now, it's very heavy on wide receiver. I'm seeing Jeremy Maclin, Jordan Matthews, Michael Floyd, and there really isn't much value at running back as it stands right now. So I'm actually, just to go back, and I'll default, we decided before the podcast started, which I'm happy to do, that if it were sort of like I like this guy, you like this guy, we're going to go with your picks as far as just the exercise here. But for what it's worth, looking back on it, I don't really think Randall Cobb is that big of a step down from Amari Cooper, whereas I would argue that, the top running back they have on the board right now is Ryan Matthews in Philadelphia. I would argue he is a monster step down from LaShawn McCoy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but had we taken Cooper, then McCoy falls a little further. I think Jeremy Hill got picked about 2 picks before we took Cobb, so maybe he's available. I really think has a bounce back year, so maybe him or Forte falls. But yes, there's still a big drop off from McCoy, but I think Hill's going to have a bounce back year this year. I really, as you know, I'm very dialed into the Bengals, and there's a lot of things that he has done this offseason that I think shows a lot of maturity, and that fumble really got to him, and he wants to really change his perception. He scored a touchdown in a preseason game. He dropped the football as soon as he got in the end zone. He ran straight to the bench, sat down, high-fived his teammates. But
all right, hold on, not to interrupt you, but we're coming up on our next pick here, so let's talk a little strategy.
Okay.
We like in Jeremy Maclin. He's the ex in Kansas City. Julian Edelman is always reliable anytime you get somebody with Brady. Dante Moncrief had a monster college career. I've yet to see it in the pros, but he does have some speed. Ryan Matthews, injury risk, but a decent player in Philly, although we do already have 2 running backs. Jordan Matthews, the ex-receiver, Kelvin Benjamin, back for Carolina. Who are we liking? Where are you thinking right now? And Maclin just went, so he's out.
I actually really like Tyler Lockett. He's down the board a bit.
A little, but that never bothers me. If we think he's the best guy available, then we go ahead and take him. And actually, they're saying because of his big play threat, he could be a nice player. We're pulling the trigger on Lockett, yay?
Yeah, I like Lockett. I think depending on how our roster would be constructed at this point, we may have had to shake him, somebody else to shimmy him. But I really think Tyler Lockett's set to have a breakout year. He really closed the year strong. He's such a huge deep threat. And the thing with him and his speed, he also does punt returns. So there's that chance he takes a punt return to the house, you get a free 6 points.
Yep.
But second to that is when Wilson gets in that scramble drill, which he's so good at making guys miss.
Yep.
All of a sudden, Lockett's running up the seam, and the corner has already came in to try to tackle, Russell Wilson, and Lockett throws his hand up, and Russell launches it. Those 80-yard touchdowns can really switch a game for you on a week-to-week basis. So 80 yards in a TD, most leagues, that's at least 12 points for you. That is massive. And now we've got a really strong core to our team set up, 2 solid running backs, 3 good receivers. We have Cobb is probably our most dependable receiver week in and week out.
Evans is a ceiling that's out of control, though.
Evan has an out-of-control ceiling, and Lockett is our guy poised for a huge breakout year. Now we're set. This draft could not have set up any better for us. Now we're set up to just take best player available, whether it's a running back, a receiver, We'll start to see the tight ends start to come off the board here in a little bit. Even a guy like Dion Lewis, he isn't going to play for a little while, but he could be the guy who's insurance for McCoy. If McCoy goes down when Lewis comes back 4 or 5 games in, all of a sudden he's fresh and throwing up monster numbers. And we're getting into that second tier of tight ends behind obviously Gronk, and then the first round guys that have the upside that everyone's buying into, the Jordan Reeds and the Greg Olsons of that sense. So I think we have a really good shot here. I'm
loving this team so far. Absolutely.
So we talked about Allen Hurns probably not being able to match his production from a year before because of the high touchdown to catch ratio and the added weapons there in Jacksonville that are going to take away targets from him, Julius Thomas and things of that sort. So I would shy from him. I think right now my focus in our next pick here, we're 7 left to go, 6 picks to go, Melvin Gordon and John Brown. John Brown is going to be similar to Tyler Lockett. You're going to live off that big play and hope that you play him in matchups where he's going to get a ton of targets. And Melvin Gordon is the redemption story. I mean, this is a guy that was taken no later than the 3rd round in every draft last year because he's this bell cow for San Diego.
Star Wisconsin, yeah. No,
right.
I got to tell you though, man, I'm so bearish on San Diego this year that I'm not really liking the Melvin Gordon pick. But just real quick, if I can jump in, just to recap so far. With our first overall pick, we went with Adrian Peterson. Second overall pick, we liked the ceiling on Tampa Bay wide receiver Mike Evans. Third pick, we were going back and forth between Amari Cooper and LaShawn McCoy. Might have gone Amari Cooper. McCoy was already in there. The clock was running down. McCoy ended up being the selection. It ended up working out nicely for us because Randall Cobb and then subsequently Tyler Lockett fell into our lap. So we have our starting lineup at running back and wide receiver, and we're getting very close to this next pick. Now, oh, did he just go? I was just about to make an argument for possibly going with Travis Kelce, and there he is, and he's gone. So that happens. What can you say? But
like you said, though, we always keep 2 or 3 players you like in your queue because computers crash, internet goes down, and your commissioner is going to tell you.
I'm actually going to interrupt you because we're okay. So we're on the clock here. Sorry, Cody. Melvin Gordon, John Brown, Dion Lewis. What are we thinking? Where are we going?
So at this point, I think we're really strong at receiver. We probably should go with a running back, but I really, really like
10
John
seconds.
Brown.
John Brown. Then let's go for him. You know what, man? At the end of the day, one of these guys is going to get hurt. Somebody's going to have a problem, and you got to go with the guy that you're interested in taking. So we're going to go ahead and pick John Brown, and we got him.
And the reason why you take a guy like John Brown, and he's another guy that can take the roof off, and you can play him and Tyler Lockett back and forth in that 3rd receiver spot, matchup based.
Yeah.
So you get a really high upside there. Like you said, most likely, unless McCoy or Peterson go down, we're not going to take either of those guys out. So why don't we wait and see if there were 3 or 4 running backs just staring us in the face? Why don't we wait and see if one of these guys falls in our lap?
Yeah, it looks like that might be the case. We're up in 2 picks. So are we looking at Chris Ivory? You still liking Melvin Gordon, assuming he's there? Dion Lewis, there's Gio in there. Who you liking at running back?
I would probably go Gordon here just because he's at least going to get the lion's share of carries in San Diego.
Okay. Melvin Gordon is now on the bench, so we have yet to pick a quarterback, and we have yet to pick a tight end. I got to tell you, just because I'm so down on San Diego. I think it's going to – I think it's at this point, it's a 4-horse race for number 1 overall next year. San Francisco, Miami, San Diego, and Cleveland. I think those are your 4 far and away worst teams in the NFL. One of them will surprise me. I'll bet you 3 out of those 4 will be drafting easily top 10, possibly top 5. And so, the old rule of thumb, which I know you're not a huge fan of, but regardless, that you want to go after running backs and quarterbacks on good teams and wide receivers on bad teams. And Melvin Gordon is the running back, a disappointing year last year on a pretty bad team.
Right, and I agree with that in general. And like I said, maybe Dion Lewis is a higher upside pick, but I just know with these injuries, he's probably going to be there for our next pick.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
He's sliding and guys are going to be tentative. And you have to think a lot of people probably don't have 2 running backs right now. Another thing to keep in mind when you're drafting is click on teams and see what other teams have filled out certain things. See what the guys near you have picked.
All right. I'm gonna interrupt you here so we can get back to the board. I'm looking at maybe going after a quarterback or going after a tight end here. What are you thinking as far as the value that's left here? Tom Brady's on the board, but we do still see Dion Lewis, Gio, Bernard, Deshaun Jackson. There's some pretty decent players here. Who are you liking? What are you thinking?
I mean, I never just pick to pick. So I would pick at this point. I would pick Dion Lewis or Sterling Shepard. I would say probably Sterling Shepard, so that we have a backup running. I would say Dion Lewis has probably got the biggest upside.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's go.
Right now, you're swinging for the fences, right? And like, if you just pick a tight end or a quarterback just to do it, you end up with less talent on your roster because, I mean, so go back to the tight end list.
Yeah, I mean, Eifert's probably good. Martellus Bennett might be a nice player. I'm not really trusting very much after them. I had Ladarius Green as a dark horse pick, but with his concussion issues, that might be a problem. Guys, I'm liking a little bit later. You got to think Jared Cook. Although now, but then the problem is now we've got Randall Cobb,
right,
wide receiver in Green Bay.
I say we try to get Eifert with our next pick if he's still there. If you end up with Eifert or you end up with Jimmy Graham 2 rounds later, like, are you going to freak out? Like, no,
Well, yeah, but the problem is, again, though, that if we go with Jimmy Graham, then that means we've got 2 Seattle pass catchers because we've already got Tyler Lockett. And that is one thing that I think we should try to stay away from. I would actually argue, Charles Clay might be a nice pick.
Ebron has looked good in training camp.
Yeah, and I mean, Ebron, of anybody on the Detroit Lions team, Ebron would be the guy. Okay, so Eifert fell to us. Let's go with him.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got
huge upside. Okay, so the first 2 weeks we'll pick a player up with our last pick or something.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Play him, and so be it. Our roster should be so strong week 1, it's not going to matter. At this point, our week 1 roster is going to be loaded, and if we don't have a tight end, it's not going to kill us.
No, certainly
most
not.
teams' tight ends aren't going to score more than 5 or 6 points anyways. Find someone on waivers, hope you get a couple points, and weather the storm. But you've got a really strong roster now for the long run.
I think it is worth noting, and this is something important, that we're not going to shy away from. This is an exercise. This is an entertainment show. We're just trying to have some fun here. But I did notice, if you look in the bottom corner here, that 7 of the last 8 picks have been kickers. So just keep in mind that when you're doing these fantasy mocks, that you are going to have those guys that don't take it seriously, that are kind of, doing something else, while they're messing with this. So the world of what –
you can check and see, too, if they leave the draft, then Yahoo will automatically fill their roster first.
Yeah, exactly. Although I've been in 1 or 2 leagues now where you've had a guy who had a wedding or had a problem or whatever it was, and he had to auto draft, and he ended up winning the whole league. So I'm not saying that there aren't outliers and things like that, but some of these rankings are scary accurate. I digress. Who are we looking at? I'm seeing Tom Brady still on the board. I think that would kind of be, especially in his anger and his rage. I'm seeing Jameis Winston, who's a guy I'm big on. And then Stephon Diggs. He's a guy who, frankly, I can't believe isn't getting more love. And dare I say, Tom Terrific, Deshaun Jackson, Gio, those guys would all be off the board right now if we didn't have idiots drafting kickers in the 10th round.
I think we should probably skip about 10 people.
Yeah.
So I think we should start with like the Amir Abdullah area because I think even Kevin White would be gone by this point.
Yeah,
I really like Kevin White this year, but everyone's in love with him.
All right, so let me step up and I think Kevin White will probably have a nice year, but I'll throw out. Do we want to get our quarterback
Jameis
here? I am all in on Jameis Winston this year, man. I think he could be the sleeper of the draft. I actually like the guy who went 1 pick behind him. I think Mariota might have a very nice year too, but I think Jameis is set to pop. This guy, and the other nice thing too is Now we've got the Jameis to Evans combo, which I know you're hot cold on. I actually really like it. A couple years ago, I had Gronkowski and Brady on the same roster, actually last year. And for the first couple weeks, I mean, it was just insane. You know, how I think it was 3 touchdowns in the opening game.
Yeah, I mean, and I like it. Like we talked about in one of the other podcasts, is I'm not going to draft to do it, but like I said, so say the both of us, which we do, like Mariota, like Winston right now.
Yep.
You have Mike Evans. It's an easy teeter. You take Winston, you know, because now you get that double dip opportunity. You get that week winning opportunity. If they hook up 2 times, you have, I mean, you look at the stats and it's like if your quarterback hooks up with one of your receivers 2 times, you're probably 30% more likely to win. If they hook up 3 times in one game and you don't win that week, you got a sorry-ass roster.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's absolutely true. It does present a few issues because now we've got Mike Evans, Adrian Peterson, and Jameis Winston. So literally our starting, our QB1, our RB1, and our wide receiver 1 all out week 6. As far as that goes, Cody, quickly because we're about to come back around, are you a fan of stacking bye weeks, or are you a fan of trying to diversify? In other words, are you willing to just say, okay, week 6, I've got 5 of my starters out. I'm just going to lose that week, but every other week I'm full go?
So much changes between now and week 6. I really just draft based on who I think's the best player. And then like at this point, if I have a week 6, I might just throw another guy in on week 6. I'm definitely a fan of just tanking 1 week. And if you can, and that way you're at full strength pretty much the rest of the time. At this point, for me, Willie Snead is a really good pick.
Okay.
Corey Coleman, Snead's going to be gone because they're going to auto draft here. The next top 3 are going to go.
So I kind of like Derrick Henry. Kamar Aiken came on late last year.
I like Stephon Diggs if we think still might be there.
I mean, listen. I mean, at the end of the day, you gotta deal with the board that you're drafting. Let's go ahead and take Diggs.
I like Diggs.
I love Diggs, but there's no way he's going to be. Stephon Diggs is not going to be there at the 5th pick in round 11. But for the sake of this,
his average draft position is like round 10.
Okay, fair enough.
So everyone's all on Laquan Treadwell. Everyone thinks Treadwell because he's a rookie. But I think Diggs, you know, he only had a couple good games. A lot of people are sour on him because there's only a few games. But in the preseason, Bengals played the Vikings when they practiced together. It seemed from all the practice stuff I saw in those games, Diggs is the one that has the best connection with Bridgewater too at this point. And, you know, if you think they're going to do ground and pound and play action, the guy with the speed is going to be your guy that's going to hit those big plays. So I think he's a really good upside this year. And I think maybe we're around late on him. He probably goes in the 10th in your draft, but for the sake of the argument, you know, he's a good player, and you know, if he's there, he might slide to you. Some people are going to be, soured on him. So
before we circle back around here, there's a few guys that I'm looking at that are still on the board and probably won't be, but again, for the sake of the exercise, Derrick Henry, former Heisman winner, Kamar Aiken, as we had just talked about, Corey Coleman is going to be.
What's our bench look like?
Well, our bench is fairly deep. Now, remember, we've got John Brown here instead of and Jameis is our starter. So our bench is now John Brown, Melvin Gordon, Dion Lewis.
2 running backs, 2 wide receivers.
Basically, yes, exactly. And then, I mean, frankly, I think at this point, based on what we've got here, and again, I know best player available without a doubt, but I would argue that I think our running back situation is set. So maybe roll the dice on Bilal Powell. Or
I really like Powell this year.
I
think Forte is going to go down. He's a good backup at running back, but we already have 2 on our bench. But we also have 2 injury-prone players, honestly, with McCoy and Dion Lewis.
Yep. I kind of like, and then the other guys I'm looking at, as I said, Derrick Henry, former Heisman winner, and then Aiken just went, so he's gone. Mohamed Sanu, wide receiver in Atlanta, and then Devin Funchess in Carolina. I mean, he didn't really do much last year, but that doesn't mean that he can't step up. And then
year 2 is the year that receivers usually break out. I don't like Sanu. I think he'll be more of a possession guy there, and his limited time as a 2 guy in Cincinnati, he was okay, but never really did anything that knocked your socks off. I think Michael Thomas has huge upside. If this were a keeper league draft, I'd be going Michael Thomas in a heartbeat. Because this late you're going to be able to keep a guy like that for a long time.
We're on the board here, so we're on the clock, I should say. Should we go with Powell because of the injury concerns?
Yeah.
Okay, and then in doing that, now we are done at the running back position moving forward. Now, as we are kind of approaching the end of the draft here, we have two bench positions left, and we do need to get a backup quarterback, and we do need to have a starting tight end for the beginning of the season. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll take a look at which of these guys we're liking as it comes back around. But who are you thinking right now? Again, tight end and quarterback. I'm seeing Eric Ebron still on there. Yep.
Yeah, he might be out at the beginning part of the year as well, but I think Ebron or
Jared Cook in Green Bay. I mean, I think
he might be healthy early on, which might be what we need just to get us a gap to Tyler Eifert.
Yeah, and then, I mean, he might actually be a nice little bit of trade bait.
One of the things that I've talked about before, and one of the things you have to keep in mind is, like, when you're drafting and say you're going to trade a guy week 4 and you're not getting what his numbers are right now, you have to remember, first of all, throw his draft pick out the window. Like, you got him with the 10th round pick. Who cares? Like, if someone tries to say, oh, it was your 10th round pick, be like, so your first round pick is sucking. Like, who cares where they're picked? Like, this are his numbers. I'm selling. Like, you can't play dumb, right? Like, people are like, I know you're just trying to unload him. But like, look, I don't need him. I can't score points on my bench. Your bench player that I'm going after. I mean, it's smart to go after another player's bench player that you think might have a good second half. You know who I'm going to tell you to pick on this list?
Cincinnati. Let's just do it because you're the guy. Although some other – I do like Cincinnati. I like Seattle, Carolina, Kansas City, none of whom are there. New England and Baltimore actually have pretty manageable schedules. I do see Baltimore is still on there as well. And then, as weird as this sounds, Oakland, who Matthew Berry has ranked 27, and the Tennessee Titans, who Berry has ranked 31. I don't think you should take Oakland or Tennessee because both of those teams are going to be around later, so you can pick them up as you need them. But they have pretty favorable matchups overall. So there might be some nice value as far as if you're looking at the rotational approach to defenses. That being said, look, Cincinnati's got one of the deepest defensive rosters in the NFL. I've said this on almost every podcast I've done when the Bengals have come up. They got hands down, far and away, the best overall value in the draft. 4th round, Andrew Billings out of Baylor. That guy is going to be a monster playmaker in the NFL, and they got him in the 4th round, just continuing to add to that, continuing to stock the cupboard, if you will. Now, we're up in 2 picks. Who are we liking as far as, I mean, these are kickers. Chandler Catanzaro in Arizona is always a nice player. Nugent in Cincinnati, Vinatieri in Indianapolis.
Missing stuff like crazy. I think at this point you try to look for a team that's going to have a really high offense. Maybe Dan Bailey or Catanzaro.
Okay. Well, let's see. Catanzaro just went. How about Mason Crosby in Green Bay? Vinatieri.
Crosby, I like Crosby. He misses a lot, but he also has that ability to make those long ones, Yeah. So that's why I like him and Dan Bailey. You see Bailey has the 4 and he had 3.8. Crosby does. So you look for those guys with a long leg because really, that's the ones that are going to get you those 20-point kicker weeks like crazy, right?
Sure.
And to go back to Cincinnati on defense, they're also going to be trying to run the ball this year. So the less times your defense has to cover a team on offense, the less points they can score. For the most part, I mean, you look at that roster, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah, I got to tell you, this is a pretty solid draft. And look, as we said before, mistakes get made. That's the nature of war here. But our starting lineup is as follows. Jameis Winston starts at quarterback. Mike Evans, Randall Cobb, Tyler Lockett are the starting wide receivers. Adrian Peterson, LaShawn McCoy. I love that combo to start. I understand your injury concerns when it comes to McCoy, but the fact of the matter is he is one of the few, and I think there's maybe 10 of them in the league that is the tried and true. He is the guy. So many of these places, even you look at Pittsburgh, and there's a little bit of running back by committee going on, and Le'Veon Bell went well before LaShawn McCoy did. Starting tight end Tyler Eifert, a little bit of concern with injury, so we did back that up with Jared Cook, the Green Bay tight end, who I actually think could have a really nice year. Don't expect him necessarily to last that long. I think a couple questionable areas came in, as you had said, with it might have been smart to maybe grab another stud QB at the Melvin Gordon spot. I understand why we took him, but the way the rest of the draft shaked out with Dion Lewis, Bilal Powell also falling to us, I think we could have gotten a little bit better value in Melvin Gordon, and then obviously Stephon Diggs, Bilal Powell. If we didn't go with a quarterback at that Melvin Gordon pick, a QB there would have been very smart. So I think overall this is a pretty rock-solid team, Cody. Cody Tewmey is SugarBookie.com's senior fantasy analyst. Make sure to check him out on Twitter @Kodakai. I'm Anthony Carabasi, your host. As always, check me out on Twitter @SugarBookie, both of us, Facebook.com/SugarBookie. This has been our 2016 fantasy mock draft, and it's been a doozy of a good time. Cody, thanks so much for coming by, man.
No problem, Anthony. Take it easy.
Sportsbooks, office pools, fantasy. No matter how you monetize NFL football, SugarBookie has you covered, and all bets are on. Best of luck with your fantasy drafts this year, my friends, and as always, thanks for stopping by.